This is Access LaPorte County, Channel 97. Coming up next is the October 3rd meeting of the Michigan City Enrichment Corporation Grant Workshop. You can find more information for this meeting at
www.accesslaportecounty.org. Good evening, everyone, and welcome. Thank you for coming. The Michigan City Community Enrichment Corporation would like to welcome you to our grant writing seminar, workshop, whatever we're calling it today, Sue. I'm Ron Miller. I'm the board president. Craig Hinchman is one of our board members. Sue is going to tell you she spent a number of years on the board and is now our administrative assistant and has been for quite some time, and she's the one day-to-day that takes care of all this. We do this every year because, as Sue will tell you, several years ago we went from paper applications to computer applications, and we, at the end of each grant cycle, we review how everything went and if there's any improvements in the process. But after doing it for a number of years, we've got it down to somewhat of a science. And as I was explaining to everybody, and again Sue will go into this, we will hand out roughly between $625,000 and $650,000 each year. We actually have $750,000 that's provided by Blue Chip every year. The first $100,000 goes to the zoo. That's part of the operating agreement between the City of Michigan City and Boyd Gaming. And the other $650,000, about 1% of that goes to operations. Things like paying an attorney, because we got to make sure we're doing it right, but now our attorney is donating her time, so we don't have that expense. Sue is handling the day-to-day. Boy, she just gets absolutely rich. She has trouble buying meals for a week on what she makes from the Enrichment Corporation, but she's the one who keeps all this stuff working. And so she's going to go through this process. There's no stupid questions. If you have any questions at all, that's what we're here for. We want to encourage as many people as possible to apply. As we said, we'll give out, I think we gave out $623,000 last year, but we had over $1 million worth of applications. So obviously there's going to be some organizations that are going to apply and not be granted funding, and we will encourage anybody that doesn't get funded to please apply the following year, because obviously situations change, and we want to try to fund as many organizations and as many projects as possible. One thing I will mention too, and there's been some discussion, and we've had discussions over the board. I served on the board for 6 years, been away for 3 and came back again on the board in April, and we've had a lot of discussions over the years about the actual grant process, because sometimes you'll look and you'll see one organization got 4 grants, another organization may have only gotten 1, some organization might get any at all, and how we decide that. And I was explaining that, and Sue's going to explain that process, but the point I was going to make is, some people say, well, why are some organizations getting 4 or 5 different grants? And the reason for that is, we don't look at the organization, we look at the project. The project is what we look at, because we want to make sure that the dollars are spread as well as possible, funding the best possible programs, and that the money is used the way the grant applicant says that it's going to be used. And so we look at the projects, and if an organization provides 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 good projects, and they rank higher than some of the other organizations that only present 1, then they may get 3 or 4 different grants. But we're not awarding it to the organization, we're awarding it to the project. So that's how the process works. And Sue's been doing this a lot longer than me, and she's a lot better at it than I am, so I'm just going to turn it over to Sue Webster. And again, anybody has any questions, please feel free. That's what we're here for.
I was on the board for non-continuous years, 3 separate 2-year terms, and you can only be on the board for 9 years, and then you have to leave for at least a year. So I was their administrative assistant for several years before I had to retire from the board, and now I'm only their administrative assistant. But I love this. I wanted to stay involved in the MCCEC, so I'm glad that I could do it by staying on as the administrative assistant. We have 2 board members here tonight. We have 9 board members altogether. And I printed up their names. I want to tell you their names so that.
Why don't you let me do that, and I'll use a list just
Oh, you'll
because
do that?
so that I don't forget somebody. I know it's in here. 'Cause
That's why I printed it. And I gave it to
you can't find your copy. Well, Craig Hinchman, obviously, he's sitting here, so I can
I have my copy
get
now.
yours now. Okay, go ahead. Oh, okay,
Oh, you can do it.
okay.
Ron has
George.
such a nice radio voice.
I know he does.
George Kazmerzak has been on the board for several years. He was here when I was on the board before. Ken Fly Sr., Craig Hinchman, Candace Nelson, Pete Zidius, Ron Miller, I remember him. Brett Cox is the vice president of Blue Chip, and Blue Chip always has 1 seat on our 9-member board. They're providing money, so. They also provide the room that we'll go to in January where we do the deliberations, so we lock ourselves up in the room and we don't leave until it's over. Ed Satoris, is that the way Ed pronounced his last name? I believe it is.
Yeah.
Ed Satoris, he's involved in not-for-profits. And Stacy Benning, who poked her head in the door just a few minutes ago, she is a relatively new board member. Then Mary Lake, the deputy prosecutor, is our attorney. And those are our board members. They're all volunteer, nobody gets paid. We're here to hand out money and support local organizations, that's what we do.
We all are very proud to be able to do this. The MCCEC receives $750,000 each year from the Blue Chip, and we award grants to not-for-profit organizations, 501c3s, that are here in the Michigan City Area School District. The first 100,000, I think Ron just said this, I'm not sure. The first 100,000 automatically goes to the Washington Park Zoo, 100,000. So they use it for big projects that they're working on. And we have, since the board's inception in 1997, we have awarded more than $18 million to organizations in the Michigan City Area School District and $2 million to the Washington Park Zoo. Last year, we received applications totaling almost $1 million in grant requests, and our funds are limited, so these grants are very competitive. Of the 43 grants that we awarded this spring, 21 of them were for $10,000 or less. You will find our application online at mccec.com. And when you enter the website, this page right here is what you'll see. And if you haven't all read this, please do so before you start filling out your application. It'll give you some additional information. And then up in the top right-hand corner, there was a login or a registration button, and if you already have a grant open, you just go into login, and if you're starting a new grant application and you have not done that previously, you need to register on that page. This is our 7th year of the online applications, and I will open an application up here on the screen in a few minutes. To receive a grant from us, you must provide us with the IRS determination letter providing your federal ID number, and it needs to be current for 2022. And you must also provide confirmation that you are a 501c3 in good standing, and I'll explain those more when I have the application open. We'll discuss this and other documents when the application is on the screen. When you start your application, you do not need to compose it in one setting. You can save it, print it, and at any time reopen it to continue later. Once submitted, you will be able to read it or print it. However, after the application is submitted, you cannot make any changes in it, or no additions can be, submitted. It's what you submit when you submit it is all the board members will be reading. I would suggest that before submitting the grant application, you have someone else read it so they can just proofread what you've done and make sure there aren't any errors in it. You're wanting money in this and you don't want to have any kind of error in it. If you receive a grant from us, you will need to open the application to submit the required quarterly reports. So you always need to keep your password handy, and if anything would happen that someone else would want to submit a quarterly report or need to submit a quarterly report, they need to access that application to be able to submit it. The deadline for submitting the grant applications is Wednesday, November 30th at 11:59 p.m. Central Time. No applications can be submitted after this date. The computer program automatically shuts down. Since no changes can be made, please read it and make sure you're providing everything that you want the board members to see. After the November 30th deadline, our 9 board members will review and rank each application. We will discuss the applications and decide who will receive grants in January and February. We will send out the grant contracts to those receiving a grant or a letter stating that you did not receive a grant from us in this grant cycle. You may receive the entire amount you apply for. You may receive a partial amount, or it could be possible that you wouldn't receive anything depending on how many grant applications we receive. It's been probably like 5 years, but I don't know what happened that year, but we received $2 million worth of grant applications, and we, can award $650,000 of it, so that was a rough year for a lot of applicants. And then the grants, the contracts and cover letters and a couple other documents are mailed out to you by mid-February, and then the grant awards banquet, when we give you your grant awards, is at the end of March. I will now show you an application. You can ask questions if you want to. Here I had this all written out. If you raise your hand, and one of the board members can see it, then they can tell me if I don't see it. But I have a feeling if any of you have any questions, I'll know it right away.
Let me touch on the quarterly reports for just a moment. We're in the process of reviewing the quarterly report process now, but part of the requirement is that every 3 months you submit a quarterly report. The reason for that is we feel pretty protective of the money, because we want to make sure that it goes to organizations that will use it properly and use it for the money exactly what they applied for. And we have had some situations where organizations came to us and said, our situation has changed since we've submitted the application. This is what we said we were going to use it for. Instead, we'd like to use it for this. In most cases, the board has approved that. We've also had situations where organizations came back to us and said, instead of using it for this, we used it for this. And when that happens, in most cases, we require that they return the money, because we want to make sure that the money is used the way we're awarding this money based on the application. And that organization is saying, this is what we're going to use it for, so we want to make sure that it's used that way. And so the quarterly application is a way for us to keep up with how the money is being used. And so each organization is required to submit a quarterly report saying, during this 3-month period, I spent so much money, this is what I used it for, here's the documentation to show that I actually used it for what I said I was going to use it for. And we're pretty strict about that, just because, again, we want accountability, because we feel like we've given out $18 million over the years that we've been doing this, and that's a lot of money to organizations, but don't have to tell all of you in this room that money for not-for-profit organizations is getting harder and harder to come by. And so we want to make sure that every dollar that we award is used in for the purpose that the grant application says. And so that's the reason for what we do, what we're doing.
Thank you. Those were all good points.
Every once in a while.
This opening page of the cover sheet for the grant applications is all basic information about your organization. Those top 3 things get added by the computer itself, but we need the project title, and I put this one together just to be able to have one here on the screen for you. I had to open an application myself, except I'm not, applying to have a summer camp program. but it's just something that I could open. We need the federal ID number and the address of your activity, the organization's address, phone number, email address, and the contact person's name. And the contact person's name is who I will send out emails throughout the year if I need to for any reason to your organization. If perhaps Kathy would leave, then somebody from your organization would need to email us and let us know that Kathy is no longer there, and somebody else will need to receive the information. There's no way for me to change anything at all in these applications, so I can't actually go in and update my information. But I keep a list of emails as I get them with somebody else's name on them if I need to go back through, and when I'm sending out an application, I'll have the new address as to who to send an email to. The contact person's title, phone number, email address, the amount requested, and then a brief summary of your request is also on the cover sheet. And that is, all of our questions like this is limited to 650 characters. So you need to be brief, but we need just a brief summary of your request. And then the next page is the grant narrative. We ask 5 questions. That's all we ask you to fill up responses for. It's 5 questions. And that is them. The first one, the organization. What is the purpose of your organization and whom do you serve? Can you all read this?
Yes.
Okay. And you just fill that out within 650 characters. The needs. What are the needs for the project or program in Michigan City and our other groups? Serving the residents of the same program, and if so, what is different about yours? The purpose, the third question is the purpose, and what will this project or program accomplish? The evaluation, how will the grant, if made, be evaluated? How will you and the MCCEC Corporation know whether the purpose has been met? And that will be pretty much all answered in your quarterly reports. And then the impact. Impact isn't up there. Describe the effect of this project on the organizations, clients, and the community or targeted issue. There it is. And how visible will the project or program be? A lot of times press releases are issued by the organizations, and when you're going to mention the MCCEC in a press release, and it tells this in the contract, you know, and all that we send out a 3-page contract, but if you're going to use the Michigan City Community Enrichment Corporation listed in your press release at any time, you're supposed to send it to us first so that we can see it and approve what you're saying. It's not that anybody ever says anything bad, but we just wanna know it's coming. So those are the 5 questions that we ask. And then you have a budget guide. And the budget guide, you'll have a list of revenue and expenses. And the revenue will ask you to name where you're getting additional funding for your program. There are some agencies that ask only us to fund their program, and we always want people to ask for several different funding options. So there's a drop-down box that you can click either actual or potential. If you know you're getting it, if you've already been approved for funding from anybody else, you know, you put actual, and then like for our grant, you would click potential because it's for money you're hoping to receive for your program. And then the expenses, your program expenses should add up to the same thing your budget is listed as. Because we want you to see that you have this all worked out and it's going to going to cover, what your budget is going to be covered with your expenses.
Let me touch on that funding. Occasionally we will get an organization that say, I have a project and we want the MCCEC to provide 100% of the funding. And rarely do we do that. I mean, it could be in-kind contributions. It could be a portion of the funding, or out another organization, but we're trying to stretch our dollars so that we can support as many programs as possible. And so, generally speaking, unless it's an unusual situation, we're not going to fund 100% of any one project. I think you can all understand what I'm saying, but sometimes we will support we'll fund a significant portion of it. But generally, we do not fund 100%. We want to see that there's some other skin in the game, I guess we could say.
And then underneath the budget and expenses, there are two questions that all you have to fill in as a tiny bit. What percentage of the board of directors, can't read it, that's too big and too close. What percentage of the board of directors contributed any amount of dollars to their organization in the most recent fiscal year? We normally want to see a 100% there because we want to know that all of your board members are contributing to the agency as well. Sometimes it's lower, but we want it to be pretty close to 100% if they actually do it. We know that there are some board members who might not be able to afford it. They benefit to the board for their knowledge. But anyway, we ask that question. And then we also ask if there are if you applied for any or will be receiving any other funding. And people rarely have anything additional here that they didn't think to put up there in the budget. But even if they didn't, you can go in and review anything that you have until you submit it, until you actually submit the application. You can change anything that's on the application. But anyway, so in case there's something that you don't see how maybe it would fit in with your revenue, you can add it down there. And then we go, do any of you have any questions about any of this? No? Good. Then we come to our supporting files. And the supporting files, we ask for a financial statement, the current year, so that would be a financial statement, and those are usually profit and loss or some kind of, sometimes it's the accountant review, sometimes it's just like a spreadsheet type of thing that a smaller organization would just create on their own. And then, so that would be for the current year would be from January through October, November, whenever you submit the grant, we'd like to have it up to date as possible. And then the one for the previous year would be, in this case it would be 2021, and we would want that to be the same type of document that covers the entire year of 2021. Some of the organizations have, the accounting, their calendar year or their financial year is from, July 1st to June 30th. And so sometimes they upload both documents so that they can cover the whole year with two different documents. Then we ask for the board of directors list. And we ask that because sometimes when there's a brand new organization, and we actually have had people who have had like one person on their board, and that's the person who's writing the grant, or we got one last year that said we don't have a board and just stuff like that, but we want to know that they have people behind them and that are on their board who knows, maybe has knowledge of not-for-profits, or maybe they have a financial background and they can help them with like quarterly reports and expenses and that type of thing. But we just want to know that you have people on your board who you can depend on for any questions you might be asking while filling out a quarterly report if you're a new agency. We ask for the IRS determination letter. And those are, sometimes pretty old. We get some that are back, I think we get one or two that are from the 90s. But we ask that you receive a reaffirmation letter from the IRS, which will just update it. You keep the same IRS determination, the IRS number, the federal ID number, but they'll send you a reaffirmation letter. And you can call the IRS for free and request it. And of course, in the past, it would take like 5 days to get it. I mean, many agencies would tell me they got it in 5 days. Now, of course, in the last couple of years, it's been, 2 months because everybody was working from home.
I just got mine last month that I requested
Oh,
for the grants
super.
last year.
Oh,
That's
super.
how long it took. Yeah.
Oh, great. We have a couple of agencies who do
Like a
that, and I'm
year.
always so glad that they do that. If they're already getting grants, they know ahead of time that we're gonna ask for
Well,
that.
I was saying I asked for it for last year's cycle,
And she just
and I
got it.
just now got it.
Oh,
So it took
that
almost
was
a year.
Last year's, oh,
Yeah, it took
Yeah.
almost a year.
Yeah. So right now, while this IRS is still, pretty bogged down, we're not expecting everybody to have one, but we hope that you'll give it a try. We had people last year who told us they got it in 14 days, and I'm not sure how that happened. I don't know how that happened, because I
Yeah,
think that was more of a rare thing.
yeah.
Yeah. But anyway, so if you, don't get it, we understand that the IRS is very backed up, but we would like for you to if you can. Or if you got one last year, we don't necessarily need for you to get a new one, but we have, I think last year we only got 6 new ones. We got 6 reaffirmation letters. But anyway, so we'll work with whatever you submit to us, but if you have one that's really old, we'll want you to get it updated. And then we asked for the Board of Directors approval evidence, and that is a letter from the board president who will submit a letter saying that the board is aware that who's ever writing the grant is writing this grant for the MCCEC. It has to be a specific letter stating that they are aware of a grant to the MCCEC. It can't just be a letter saying, we approve anything they said that the director submits. We need to know that the board is aware that you're asking for a grant from us. And then there is also and actually this, let me see here. The Board of Directors approval evidence, that, here's what I was looking for, the exemption in force statement. A lot of organizations put that sentence on the approval evidence. However, we want you to upload, if that's the case for your organization, to upload it in both places, because we don't want our board member to have nothing listed in the exemption in force statement, nothing attached. We don't want our board members to have to go back into the Board of Directors approval evidence and open it to see if it was mentioned in that letter. So all it is the president of the board stating that I affirm we definitely still have our 501c3 active and it has not expired. The first year I was on the board, we gave out grant awards in March, and after the grant awards, somebody came up to us and said, you awarded a check to somebody today whose 501c3 has expired, has lapsed. They didn't send in that card that they have to send in, every 3 years? The card that you have to send in to keep your status going, to keep your status open. Anyway, they didn't do that, and their 501c3 expired. So we had to write to them and ask them, and then when they confirmed that yes, it did expire, they had to return the money to us. But a couple years after that, when they got back on their feet and knew what they were doing, they started receiving grants from us again. As soon as they, sent us a new determination letter with a number on it. We started giving them grants, right away, and, that's been like 6 years, and we've had no problem. And that's the only time that has ever happened, was the one time, back in 2013. So we asked for that several times, to just make sure. Plus, when we send out the grant contracts, there's an affidavit in there that the director, I believe the director of the program usually signs it, that states, and it's notarized, that they are definitely still a 501c3. So we try to cover it, because if they aren't no longer a 501c3, it might be less cause in trying to get an organization to return money to us. So that's all on the application. And again, what I want to stress to you is just to try to make sure someone else reads it, so that if they might notice something that you weren't noticing. I know when I write things, if I don't see a mistake, and then as soon as somebody else reads it, they say, "Oh, you didn't do that." But try to have someone check it before you send it in. So for the quarterly reports, if you do receive a grant, we'll have you submit quarterly reports June 30th, September 30th, December 31st, and March 31st. And several organizations will have all the money spent before the March final quarter for spending the grant award. And once you have spent it, if you spend it completely by December 31st, then you don't have to submit any further quarterly reports. In the quarterly report, you need a list of expenses, and you have to fill in the expense amount where that is. Otherwise, if you submit it and you don't have the expenses listed, I have to open it, and then you have to resubmit it with the corrections made. And when I have to open a quarterly report due to an error, it disappears from my screen, because then it's no longer considered a submitted report. And so when you resubmit it, you have to make sure that you didn't take away any of the additional documents that you submit with it. But I'm sure everybody here is going to do a good job with theirs. Let's see, we have we send out, if you receive a grant from us, we send out and this will be like in mid-February, you will receive a cover letter, and it goes over most of the rules, and it goes over the quarterly reports, reminding you to submit them, and that you need, a document providing that you actually spent what you did on something. And then there's a 3-page grant contract, and that tells a whole lot of rules to follow, guidelines that we have that you need to follow. And there'll also be that affidavit, and then there will be which is the best part, an RSVP for our banquet, which is held at Blue Chip, and they provide a wonderful dinner for us. We really appreciate that they do a lot of stuff during COVID, all the shutdown. We had a boardroom we could meet in over there so we didn't always have to be on Zoom and stuff. Brett Cox provides a lot of bonus things for us whenever we need anything. So do you have any questions about any part of the application process that I've talked about? Yes?
You've mentioned a couple times about situations where funds have to be returned, or situations where, because they didn't comply with the reporting, and where they didn't have the 501c3 was expired or whatever. What happens to that money? Does it go back into a pool? Does it go next year? Does it go back to Blue Chip?
No, it goes right back into the organization, and we've had situations either when money has been returned or when we award, we always keep a little bit of a cushion. We had a situation several years ago that Sue and I were involved in, not long after I came on the board, where a local organization gave up funding shut down bus service for the elderly and for people that needed bus service to get to doctors and so forth. And Michiana Resources stepped in and took it over. And there was a meeting at the county, and the county came up with some money, the Enrichment Corporation came up with some money, a couple of other organizations. We were able to get that bus service restored within a matter of a week or so. And so it doesn't happen very often. I mean, we'll have anywhere from, we had 43 last year. I think most of the time I was on the board, it was 55 or 60, somewhere in that area, but it's usually somewhere between 40 and 60 organizations, or not organizations, projects that we will fund. And out of that time, maybe it's happened 3 or 4 times we've had to ask for money. It doesn't happen often. But to answer your question, if we do have to ask for the money back, part of it or all of it, it goes right back into the fund and we award it to another organization.
Okay, whether it's related or not to the I guess that's what I'm asking.
Well, part of it would depend on the money.
Next person on the list or whatever.
If somebody gives us $1,000 or $500 or something, if somebody had to and again, we would evaluate this. I think we've done it both ways, haven't we? Mm-hmm. We've had some situations where in July, for example, we're not going to start the application process again until after Labor Day. We have $25,000. Let's go down the list and award for 2 or 3 more people. We might say, well, let's just put it in to the organization instead of $650,000 that we'll have this year. We may have $670,000. So it depends on the timing and how much money is involved and so forth, but the board makes that determination depending on how much money we have left. But again, we always keep that cushion just on the off chance. And we've had some situations too where, in addition to the buses, where we've had situations where somebody's come up with an emergency situation and they need money quickly, and so our board meets monthly, and we had enough money in that security fund, if you will, that we could give them some additional fund and help them get started. So it's done pretty much right on a case-by-case basis.
If in March you haven't spent all of your grant, we ask that organizations usually, when they do their expenses for March, there's money left over. If it's over $100, we ask for it back. But if it's under 100, we allow the organization to keep it, but they have to spend it on the program that we have funded you for, and then you have to, submit another addition to your quarterly report. I open your quarterly report, and then you can put the extra funding in however you spend it. I mean, it's not very much anyway, $100, but people can normally come up with that. We had an agency a couple of years ago who had like a couple $100 left over, and I wrote to them and I said, I'm sorry, but you have to send the money back to us if you haven't spent it by the end of March. So they did. But then the next year they had 22 cents short, and they sent us a check for 22 cents. Our treasurer wasn't extremely happy about having to go out to Harbor Trust and deposit a 22-cent check. But if it's under $100, just let us know and you can spend it on something else, that's related to the program.
Anyone else have any questions? Yes.
If I'm writing applications for more than one project in my organization, can I do it under my use email address for logins?
Yeah, we have to have a different email address and password for each grant. But we get organizations that submit more than one grant, and so all we ask is that you have an additional password and email address for each grant that you're applying for.
Any other questions? As you can see, and as Sue has outlined, as I mentioned before, we're going to try to make this as easy as possible for the organizations, but on the other hand, we want to make sure that we can document that the money that we're awarding is used for the purposes and the intent that the grant application calls for. And so we're pretty much sticklers about that, and that's why the quarterly reports are so important and why we stress them. But we have had some discussion as a board just within the past couple of months of maybe streamlining a little bit. We're looking at a couple of different options. I'm told that there's a couple of not-for-profits in LaPorte County that already have some pretty good quarterly reporting process, so we're looking at that as well. But we want to make it as easy as possible, but we want to make sure that the money is used for what the organizations say they're going to use it for, and that's all we're looking for. We're not trying to make it difficult on anybody. We're just trying to make sure that the money is used for the purpose that the grant application calls for. All right, well, thank you very much, all of you, for coming. And again, if you have any more questions, you can email Sue at any point. That's what she does, and believe it, the 9 board members do not want to do what she does. All she has to do is show us what she does in one month, especially during the grant cycle period. And we're very happy to have her do it.
I enjoy it so much though, you know. When I was leaving the board after 9 years, I thought, what am I gonna do not being involved in this? But luckily I'm the administrative assistant, so I am still involved in it. But we do have a voicemail number. It's 219-873-1402 that you can always leave a message on. I listen to the voice messages throughout the year. I don't listen to them every day, but during the grant cycle I do. So you can leave it. 219-873-1402. And it's on everywhere. It's in paperwork. It's on the cover sheet of this that I had up on the screen earlier. Or you can always send the emails to mccec@emichigancity.com. That's the city's website for us, and you can always send. In fact, on the main page that was up there earlier, down at the bottom, there's a contact form submission button that you can press on, and that will shoot an email to us. But I, monitor the emails every day, several times a day during the grant cycle, and the phone voicemail. So, and I'll always get back to anybody who contacts us.
And that's what Sue is for. She's our resource. So if you have any questions, please feel free to do that. She's a lot more knowledgeable about it than I am, and a lot more knowledgeable than most of the board members are. So if you have a question or have some difficulty, she'll be able to help you with that. All right, unless there's any more questions, thanks to all of you for coming.
Thank you.
Thank you. It was nice meeting the new people, and always great to see the people that already have existing grants and that I've known for over these years.
Thank you, Chris.